America is a country that was founded for the purpose of allowing Christians to do their duty before God and not to have their consciences ruled by the doctrines and commandments of men. Reese Fund exists in order to see the 10 Commandments properly applied, not just as a plaque on the wall, but to actually be used in business as though they're commandments from God that we're supposed to obey. Our goal is to find businesses and to buy them and to build them up. We want to find manufacturing businesses and use them to make sure that we can maintain our capacity to do things here. Reese Fund, Christian capital, boldly deployed.
Solid commercial.
Hey y'all, we're live with Water Break. It's good to be with you. Of course, my wife, Water Girl, Annie, Water Boy, Gabe, and we actually have an interview with Ben Greenfield coming up. If you guys want to be in a conversation with us, go email us at RenchMedia@gmail.com, RenchMedia@gmail.com, and of course, follow my wife on Instagram. That's the place to follow her. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to get involved in all sorts of drama.
Yeah,
it's up to you. I'm warning you ahead of time. I got my Maca t-shirt on today. Can you even see it? Here we go.
You're not on Instagram, Gabe?
I am, but I mean, I'm just there. I don't really use it. A little bit.
He's too busy fighting on Twitter, okay?
Yeah,
There's not enough time to fight everywhere.
There's no fighting on Instagram. It's so boring.
You can only fight on so many
I'm
platforms.
going to put my headphones in because you guys got a little quiet there.
Okay. So let's see. What did we do last week, baby? Oh, last week is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So we didn't do a show last week.
We did not.
Yeah. Well, hope you guys had a good Thanksgiving while we're at it. We had some good turkey. No Alabama white sauce. That was a little sad. But
it's not. I mean,
you should give me a turkey to smoke this Christmas.
I know. I will.
Okay.
I'll get us one.
So I'd like some Alabama white sauce in my turkey.
You just gotta let a little time go by after Thanksgiving for a turkey.
Yeah. No, that's true.
But we can do it.
If you guys don't know our guest is Ben Greenfield. He's been in the health and fitness world since 2006 or 7, I want to say. He's made a fitness guru of the year back in, 2009 or something. I should have had your full bio in front of me.
Yeah, this is fun, Ben. He's just making it up.
Yeah, I'm going to make it up.
Sure.
He also owned CrossFit at one point. No, I'm just kidding.
I just like listening to you make crap up, Gabe.
My
This is
gosh.
great.
What else did he do? What else is
I'm
he
going to
doing?
grab some popcorn and you keep going.
After this, we should maybe we just let him introduce himself.
I know
So
you
far,
probably should. Yeah, actually, Ben, I know you and Caleb and others have kind of just released this new platform and process. Actually, why don't you just kind of introduce yourself and talk about that and what you guys are doing? And we of course, all we got for you today is we're going to ask you a bunch of questions on where you changed your mind. That's probably
Changed my mind.
We are going to ask you that. We're going to ask him a lot of different
questions. Okay, you got a lot of different. Annie's got a lot of different
I
questions.
do. I have a lot of questions for you.
What new thing you just released as a platform?
Oh, well, it's not released yet. And by the way, I think I'm going to track you guys. All right. I got a little bit of feedback. Kind of sounds like music or double voices or something, but I think we'll be all right. Yeah, you mentioned Caleb. He's my buddy down there in Moscow with you guys, where I'll be joining up pretty soon. And Caleb lived up here by me in Spokane for a while, and we'd always just like spend evenings geeking out on health and fitness and trying out all the latest and the greatest biohacks and talking about everything from vegetable oils to sleep optimization. And he moved down to Moscow, and we kept in touch pretty intensively after he moved because we just like to bounce a lot of this stuff off of each other. And Caleb kind of opened my eyes to the fact, because he's a real wizard in the whole like tech, metaverse, content space online.
Yeah,
that there really isn't a good curated platform that takes the best of the best advice in the health and fitness world, puts it out there in a really beautiful way, and then takes the people who are actually producing that content and allows you to interact with them, like all your favorite podcasters in health in your back pocket, or being able to read an article by a doctor. Like I know you mentioned to me, Gabe, you had like Dr. Amy Horniman on the show. She's one of our experts. Maybe you read something she wrote about the thyroid, then you get to have an AMA on Wednesday afternoon with Amy about the thyroid.
Ask me anything.
Oh yeah, AMA, ask me anything. Yeah.
I didn't know that terminology until my wife. We started doing a water break, and my wife said, "Let's do an AMA." I'm like, "What's that?"
And LOL is laugh out loud, Gabe. Yes. And so anyways, along with that, we decided to take a lot of these products,
Okay.
you know, that a lot of people want to try. They, you know, what red light is best and which ice bath and what kind of hyperbaric chamber and which supplements and what kind of potato chips. So we want to put together a market as well called the Life Market, along with a coaching platform called Life Coaching, a testing program called Life Print that allows you to test your biology and your biomarkers. So it's basically everything you need in your back pocket. And I know people who are paying whatever, like $50,000 a year for some kind of executive health panel to have this type of information at their disposal. And we wanted to make this kind of democratized and accessible to a lot of people. So it's, you know, $15 a month for pretty much everything. So
that testing, is that a blood lab testing?
It depends. There's 3 different levels. You could get your hair tested, which is interesting. You can actually find some cool stuff about what's going on in your body from your hair levels. So you typically snip some hair from whatever body area you desire, and it will give you a download of your mineral balances and some other nutrients, toxins, metals, things like that. It's not like the best of the best test, but for around $100 or so, it can tell you a lot about your body, give you a lot of clues. And then next up from there is that's called a hair tissue mineral analysis. Next up from there would be like a HTMA, the hair tissue test, with a blood test. And then next up from that, you could just do it all. You do the HTMA, your blood test, get a full genome panel, you know, and kind of do like the best of the best testing protocol, depending on what journey you want to go on and how deep of a dive you want to take, you know.
That's cool. And you said $15 a month. That's super affordable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And obviously, like if if you're a member and you want to whatever, get a red light bed and a full genetic panel, you're pay for that stuff, but to just be part of everything and have all the content and access to the experts and everything, it's $15 a month.
Yeah. So that's valuable.
Yeah, super. I've been on it. Pardon me.
I was just being a used car salesman.
Okay. Yeah. Kind of a little background, I think, on Water Break and what we're doing. You know, Annie had been in the health and fitness industry since she graduated University of Idaho in 2007. She became a personal trainer for, you know, going on decades now, almost. And then kind of, I'd say probably in the late teens, 2017, 18, 19, Annie started, you know, realizing obviously how key food and diets were in all the ladies she had been working with. But would you say that's fair, that date time frame?
Yeah. I mean, basically just exercise wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Especially as you get older.
And she was always told to like stay in her lane too. Say that again, Ben.
Yeah, just bench press your way to health.
Right,
that's
right.
That's
especially, you know, like north of 30, it just, you know, doesn't work, as I'm sure Ben knows. Yeah.
Do more running and all that stuff.
Yeah, just run.
and then she's also just told stay in her lane. Hey, let the nutritionist do this. Let the doctor say this. Let the, you know, it's like, don't, you know, like your job is to help get them in shape. And so she started doing she's like, this is not all making sense. And she started learning a lot. And of course, podcasting has been a big help for that too, and books, so forth. And then 2020 really hit. And it like, you know, I was a little different than Annie in the sense that my mom was kind of a hippie. And so she wouldn't get us vaccinated when we were born, you know, things like that.
Happened in 2020?
Pardon me?
Something happened in 2020?
Yeah. And then 2020 hit. And then we didn't believe anything about the medical industrial world out there. It totally, and of course we took I personally had to, because of cross politic, and I had to be giving good information on our show. What does Jesus say about vaccines? What does Jesus say about pandemics? What does Jesus say? You know, that kind of thing. And Annie on the health side was working with all these women and started digging into the whole blood panel side of things and all that stuff. So she basically had to become an expert in blood paneling as it relates to your diet, food, health, you know, body issues going on, health issues going on in your body and all that stuff. We started learning, and we still have, it's still funny. Annie will work with a patient and she'll say, go to your doctor and get this blood panel. You need this, this, and this, and this. And then the doctor will say, actually, you don't need this, this, and this. Here, I'll give you this blood panel. So Annie constantly is like even fighting with doctors on what blood panels should they actually be giving to help her clients kind of sort through their own health. So that's kind of the background, I think, of kind of Water Break and Andy's own personal growth in health and fitness, and then kind of just the narrative of kind of where we got to where we're at and why we're actually interested in kind of interviewing you on some of these questions. So
sure.
Go ahead, baby.
Yeah, well.
Wait, by the way, what did Jesus say about vaccinations? Was it like render unto Pfizer?
that which is Pfizer's. Whose name is on that vaccine?
Johnson & Johnson is what he said.
Okay.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right, great. Well, Ben, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. And I have a ton of questions written down for you, and we'll just see what we can get through. But first, I think Gabe tried to guess at how long you've been in this industry, because it's longer than me. But how long really? How many years have you been doing this kind of health and fitness thing?
Graduated from University of Idaho in 2005 with a master's degree in exercise physiology and biomechanics. And during 1999 to 2005, worked there managing the wellness center, personal training down in Nyack, where I know you haunt every now and again.
Yep.
A couple other basement gyms in town, I don't know, are still around.
Yep.
Do nutrition consulting. So pretty much since 1999, great at fitness, suck at math. So I'll let you add it up.
No, that's a long time. I love it. I really like talking to people who have been doing this for a long time. And I'm like almost 20 years in.
Yeah.
So it's getting there for me also. And I'm just finding that I almost don't even want to talk to anybody who hasn't been doing it for a while. There's exceptions, of course. And there's some people who are dinosaurs who, are, just the worst. But generally speaking, I find that there's something about time and the experience and the observation over time that you get. And it just, you get a perspective and a wisdom that others newer to the game just don't have. So that honestly is one of the biggest reasons we're excited to talk to you. And I feel like as time goes on in the business, you see a lot of people, like you see their ego go down. You see less of this like one size fits all or like black and white thinking, and a little less tribalism, not always, but often, less, naivete, less falling for the fads because you've just been in it long enough, to see kind of the other side of that stuff, less nitpicking over things that are actually not that important and more emphasis on the things that are. And I don't know, just like an understanding of not just the short-term benefits or effects of something, but also an understanding of the long-term. So anyways, I'm excited to have you here. So kind of on that, or in that vein, could you take like 2 to 3 minutes to just tell our audience kind of what your, sport or fitness journey has been? Because you've done a lot of like really pretty extreme athletic things.
Yeah, not necessarily because I was convinced they were healthy. And you're right. The fitness industry, generally, you want to look for experience or how good somebody can look in undersized spandex while doing a bent over dumbbell row on Instagram. Those are usually the true criteria.
Couldn't agree more.
These days. And I did do a lot of, let's see, I started off in college, I was bodybuilding.
Okay.
And did that for a couple of years and got up to about 215 pounds and clocked in at like 3.5% body fat. So that was right when my wife and I got married, and I was just basically like a piece of meat on the couch eating tuna fish out of the can with a little bit of relish on it, and chicken breast and broccoli, and that was horrible.
Classic.
But spandex, I did look good in the equivalent of almost nothing on stage and gold fleck tanning lotion that that my wife got to apply to me backstage before I charged out there and got my flex on. She used to just like laugh at me, like, again, like we first got married, so she's always been used to me being totally weird. But when we were newlyweds, every night for like 10 to 15 minutes, I'd be doing my posing routine in front of the mirror, getting ready to go on stage, which is like a cheerleader dance routine, just silly. And then I went up to the Coeur d'Alene Ironman and watched that, and I thought, gosh, triathlon looks super cool. I want to try triathlon. So started training. Long story short, I became president of the University of Idaho Triathlon Club and just like total endurance sports junkie for the next 15 years. I raced for Team Timex. I did Ironman Hawaii 6 times, did over 5,000 miles of racing and many, many thousand more of swimming and biking and running and training and leading groups around the globe on triathlon adventures, and did a lot of endurance sports. And then I saw the Spartan race on TV, and I thought that looked pretty cool. And I thought I could just crush it because I could run really fast and had done a lot of endurance sports. And I went out there and I was doing like one of their 6-mile races, and 3 miles in, the top female passes me on the bucket carry, and I'm falling off the rope, and I don't have the mobility to crawl under barbed wire or swing on the monkey bars. So, I decided to crack the code on that, and I built a obstacle course in my backyard up here in Spokane and started training and got decent at that sport and got drafted on the Reebok Pro team. So I raced for Reebok in obstacle course racing for about 4 years. And then after that, I somehow got sane and quit doing all of that. And now I just play some pickleball and some tennis and hang out with my kids and swing some kettlebells, do a little sauna and ice baths, walk a little bit, and have a little bit more balanced approach to health and fitness. You're probably no doubt aware, Annie, of that researcher, James O'Keefe, who's done a lot of study on the so-called Goldilocks zone of exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only like 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise and 75 minutes of high intensity exercise per week,
right,
at which point the health benefits of exercise begin to plateau, and you actually see increased risk of rampant inflammation, hardened arteries, atherosclerosis, increased risk of mortality. And so, if you want to go out and do Ironmans, all that stuff that I prided myself upon for so long, to climb your own personal Mount Everest, I think it's great. It's a cool adventure, and I think it's a very rewarding thing to do, but it's, don't fool yourself into thinking it's healthy,
Yeah, that's really, thanks for telling us your history. And actually, that's really funny that you said that, because my follow-up question was going to be, in hindsight, do you think that all those extreme, trainings that you and sports that you participated in, do you think that was overall a net positive or a net negative? And I guess you kind of just answer that, but I don't know. You do things for different reasons too. I mean, there's
times in your life where it's really good to push yourself way above and beyond what's normal.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. Yeah. And it can become like, the whatever 55-year-old frowny face, constipated, dude who's been doing Ironman for, 25 years and just can't stop because he's addicted to swimming and biking and running. And the person who's like, I'm going to go out and do a Spartan race out in the mountains and check that off the list and then move on. And, not to get too esoteric, but I think a big part of this obsession with a near masochistic level of exercise is fueled by both a post-industrial lifestyle that's very comfortable. And so many people want to scratch that primal itch to go out and just do something hard. And many get sucked into, endurance sports or obstacle course races or something like that in order to do it. And then more amongst males, the relative absence of a defined ceremonial rite of passage in society or in families in which a man goes out and does something hard, whether their first hunt or, a water fast out in the wilderness or a solo gap trip or something like that, that after which they're recognized as passing from adolescence into adulthood or even childhood into adolescence. And so you get in that type of scenario, you get a lot less men who are simply boys who shave because they never had a distinct recognition of having become men at some point in their life. So many men will turn to fitness or physical feats to prove to the world that they're a man, but they keep on doing that, for decades because they just never had an official rite of passage. So they just build their own as they go through life.
Yeah,
that's actually a really good point. And being in the industry, I know a lot of people, obviously I work with a lot of people who are like, marathoners or mega endurance cyclists or whatever. And it's, it's their passion. They love it. A lot of them are, specifically very physically gifted towards that sport. So what would you say, like if you could talk to young Ben, and you had these personality tendencies and you had all this time and you wanted to do some of these extreme things, like what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, well, it is important to understand that there are many people out there doing marathons, triathlons, and largely chronic repetitive motion type of sports who otherwise would be addicts, right? It's pretty common that you'll hear the story about the person who, got out of rehab and quit an opioid addiction or dropped alcoholism because they discovered running or triathlon or some type of endurance sport. And the reason that's important is because a lot of people are genetically hardwired to be addicts. Like you actually have a gene. It's the COMT gene that triggers how quickly or slowly you metabolize dopamine. And in people who metabolize dopamine a little bit too quickly, you tend to see them needing to come back over and over again for quick hits. And a lot of times that can lead to an addictive personality. And, you know, I've had my genes tested. I definitely fall into that category. But what I've learned, to directly respond to your question, Annie, is that with age, it's very easy to think that it is some type of endurance sports that can scratch that itch for novelty, or put the brain into kind of like that alpha focus mode that it's searching for. But so can music, so can racket sports, so can learning something new. You know, I do now a lot of reading, cooking, playing guitar, playing pickleball and tennis with my family, hiking, doing a lot of like plant foraging and wilderness survival type of activities, bow hunting, things that keep my brain occupied in a similar fashion as something like chronic repetitive endurance sports, but without the same inflammatory damage. Because that's the issue. It's not as though humans were not built to move, and it's not as though we don't have a primal desire to be in a state of motion, or at least stay somewhat physically active during the day. It's just that there is a big difference between hunting, foraging, gathering, building a fence, you know, feeding the goats, tending to the chickens, mowing the lawn, etc., and going out for like a 3.5 hour long bike ride that's at like a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, when all those other things are the less damaging, like 3 or 4, if that, on a scale of 1 to 10. So I would tell myself, branch out, try a lot of other things, and understand that being physically active doesn't necessarily mean exercising. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Especially at that intensity. It's a really good answer. Okay. Well, this kind of spins off of what we were just talking about. And this is something that you alluded to at the front, but what are some of the things that over your long career, just even your own experience and all the, you know, different people you've coached and trained, what are some of the biggest things at this point in your life that you just changed your mind on? And I know you just mentioned one, but what are some of the other things?
Gosh, so many things. Well,
Ben's so good.
You know, I used to, of course, preach that you should snack and fuel the body on a regular basis in order to keep your metabolic rate elevated and keep your thyroid from getting dysregulated, and keep a constant stream of small bites of fuel going into the body during the day, right? So I'd show up to my job as a personal trainer with a little cooler with the yogurt and the carrot sticks and the Ziploc bag of almonds, and with the broccoli and rice. And, you know, they even sell backpacks. They're, you know, basically designed to get your 6 to 8 meals in during the day. All of that has since been disproven by nutrition science. There's no evidence that there's any additional increase in metabolic rate once you get past about 2 feedings or meals per day. And indeed, additional science that suggests that periods of intermittent fasting, or what's called a compressed feeding window, right? Like eating all your meals between, let's say, like 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. could actually have healthy metabolic effects. And yeah, it is true that if you're intensively dieting, particularly with carbohydrate restriction, after about 4 weeks on average, you'll tend to see some thyroid dysregulation in people who are doing that. And so you can make a case for people who are dieting and losing weight to have one day where they might refeed, you know, have like a Saturday where you have an extra carbohydrates, and maybe you're cutting your calories by 500 calories each day, but on a Saturday you're eating an extra 500 calories, right? So you're keeping the metabolism elevated. But the idea of snacking frequently to keep your metabolism elevated, that would be one. Another one would be, you know, I used to be big into the keto diet, right? So I would eat super low carb, you know, high saturated fat, you know, low intake of sugars, you know, grains, potatoes, you name it. And while it's true that ketosis can be beneficial for some people, right? Like severe carbohydrate restriction, like for people with epilepsy, seems to be able to help some people with type 2 diabetes for pancreatic cell regeneration. Some people who might be at risk for dementia or Alzheimer's, or have dementia and Alzheimer's, in most healthy active people, extreme carbohydrate restriction can lead to not enough carbs for things like the glycan composition of joints, or back to the thyroid, right? Adequate glucose for proper thyroid activity. Even things like, sperm cells and testosterone production relies upon a certain amount of carbohydrates. And so I would say the whole idea of carbs are the devil, that's another one that I've definitely changed my mind on. If I could guess, I guess I'll say one more. Let me think. I think it would be, and this is a recent one. A lot of people think. Have you guys ever talked about like cryotherapy or cold thermogenesis on the show before?
We have not actually. No, I'm
okay.
Yeah, no, we haven't yet. I'd like to.
It's pretty fantastic. I mean, there's tons of research and benefits on the idea of a sauna. I mean, decreased all-cause risk of mortality, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and Finnish studies where people who hit the sauna for 4 to 5 times a week, 20 to 40 minutes, incredible results. But we're seeing more and more research on the benefits of cold, like taking cold showers regularly, swimming in cold lakes or rivers or oceans, getting a cold plunge or a cold tub. I kind of accidentally got into cold therapy during triathlon because you kind of have no choice. It's like if it's October and the YMCA ambient air at 5 a.m. is like goosebumpy cold and the pool's at 68, you're going to swim for 40 to 60 minutes no matter what and be really cold the whole time. Or if you have a race and the water's like 50 degrees and your wetsuit's thin, you know what?
Yeah.
Buck up, Buttercup. You just got to go do it.
Yeah.
And then I started getting a lot of the research on cold. And one thing you'll hear a lot in the whole cold realm is don't get cold after exercise because it will cause your body to do such a good job at shutting down inflammation that you don't build muscle and you don't build fitness and you don't build new mitochondria. And recently, it was a recent one, I really took a deep dive into that research and looked at just about every study that suggests that's the case. And you actually have to be sitting in like a cold plunge or cold tub for 15 to 20 minutes. For that I don't know a lot of people who will finish a workout and just go like chill in cold water for 20 minutes. And the idea of like taking a cold shower so you get the body temperature down to sleep better or not be, sweating out the armpits at work, or because you find it refreshing, or a quick cold dip to kind of wake the body up before an exercise session, that's fine. So I'd say this idea of like, and it's kind of big in the whole biohacking industry, like don't get cold after exercise or you're going to destroy your workout. It's kind of bunk.
Ben, this goes kind of back to my opening thoughts here, or opening statement, is, the medical industrial complex, the medical health and fitness complex. It's been perversely incentivized for a long time. And then in addition to that, you have a lot of bad actors, involved in it all. And then in addition to that, you have a real incentive to make money. Everyone wants to sell their protein shake. Everyone wants to sell their vitamin D. Everyone wants, so you have this big marketing incentive to sell your stuff, which I think has kind of muddied a lot of the waters on what actually is true or not. And that's why, to all these studies that come out, it's like constant studies come out and say, oh yeah, creatine is going to be great for you. I remember when I first started, when I was in college and I played basketball down in California, I'd come home and train during the summers, and basically load up on creatine all summer because that's what they recommended me. It's like, you're taking, like 10 scoops a day for 30 days, and then you wonder why you start cramping up after that. Kind of thing. So I guess kind of my question is how do you sort through like all the studies that you read? And it's obviously at some point in some of your past, you read some studies, and so you started doing keto, or you read some studies, you started doing this, and then you're like, okay, maybe that's not the full story. Maybe this is the better way I need to be thinking about it. How do you kind of sort through everything you're reading and come to maybe a more wiser conclusion, and not maybe as much of a slanted conclusion based on what maybe some of the studies might lead you to? Does that make sense?
Yeah. You're never going to get rid of the elephant in the room, which is industry-funded studies, because a lot of people pay for a study unless they have some type of monetized interest in it. Creatine, for example, it's pretty rare you're going to find like a third-party independent laboratory who just decides to fork over $50,000 to do a double-blinded clinical research study on creatine. Right? There's always going to be some type of funding involved. the fact that a study is industry funded does not by definition mean that it's a bad study.
Right.
But
True.
You need to look at certain important parameters. Like, was there a control group? Like, it's just simple stuff you learn in, like, statistics 200 level class at university or lower. Like, was there a control group? Was there a placebo? Was it double blinded so that the researchers didn't know what was going on and neither did the subjects, so nobody was actually biased? Was there a large enough number of subjects for it to actually be statistically significant? Those are just a handful of things that you look at. But case in point, so somebody once told me it was this product, and they said it increases ATP by 26%, and showed me a picture of like a power lifter ripping a barbell off the ground that was published in conjunction with the study. And you go and you look at the study, and it was actually done in vitro, which is in like a petri dish on human cells in vitro with no control group. And the number of petri dishes were like 8. So that means like N equals 8, super small sample size. And, it was an industry funded study, which makes it even worse when all the other important parameters are missing. So it is important to pay attention to a lot of things like that. I mean, that's where I kind of like, the emergence of AI, because it has made digging through the research a little bit easier, because you can ask AI for, double-blinded research, research that has a good placebo control, research that is or is not industry funded, or at least whether it was, and so by piecing a lot of that together, you can start to understand whether or not the claims behind a product are actually solid. And then there's other subtle nuances that honestly are really important. Humans are not giant rodents. And rodent models like mice and rats can translate roughly into humans, but we metabolize fats differently than rodent models. We metabolize carbohydrates differently than rodent models. Most diet macro composition studies on carbs, fats, and proteins done in rodents really shouldn't be applied to humans, particularly if they're studies that are looking at the impact of those things on cholesterol levels, because rats and mice metabolize cholesterol differently than humans. Another example, and I know you're probably aware of this, Annie, is that for the longest time, even though it's changed a little bit now, most of the research on humans was done in male humans. And we know that male humans are far different biochemically than females. Females metabolize, speak of creatine, they metabolize creatine differently. They metabolize fatty acids differently. They obviously have different joint angles and different levels of fast twitch, slow twitch muscle fiber composition. And so you can't take a study that was done on men and apply that to women. In some cases, you can't take a study that was done on women in one phase of their menstrual cycle and apply that to women who are in a different phase of their menstrual cycle, right? So there's a lot of specificity that you have to look for as well, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that's helpful.
That's a great answer.
It's been crazy to me. Like in COVID, this is where me and Annie really kind of laughed at a lot of studies. I remember me and Annie were reading one study, I think it was about masking or something. And once you get through the whole study, and at the end it says, yeah, but basically this is they had like this big caveat on their study. Do you remember this?
Oh, it was just it was a study that was a part of a review that actually found that in their particular randomized controlled trial, that cloth masks were not effective against, influenza-like illness, as they called it. And at the very end, the authors were like, but you should still wear one.
Yeah, there you go. That was stuff like that we found in COVID was just hilarious.
But that was an extra sketch time for sure.
Yeah.
But no, that was a really good answer. I just wanted to say, Ben, throw back to what you were saying before. I don't remember how we got on this one, but before, what you were talking about, the keto diet being one of the things that your mind's changed on. A little too much keto and a little too much CrossFit is in fact what put my thyroid absolutely in the tank. And I'm actually still working, and I am working with Amy Horniman, who you mentioned earlier, on bringing it back. So yes to that, especially for women, you can wreck your thyroid.
You can do a lot of damage there.
Yeah.
She's great. And honestly, a lot of the reasons athletes want to get into a state of ketosis is because ketones, the byproduct of fat breakdown that can occur with either carbohydrate restriction, fasting, or even calorie restriction, are a really great fuel for the nervous system, for the diaphragm, for the heart, for the liver. You feel like you've got really good focus and even really good energy levels when you're able to shift the body into a state where these ketone bodies are elevated. But what's happened in the past 3 years is that ketones as a supplement have become widely accessible and affordable. Like, you can drink your way into ketosis by using supplements while still not restricting carbohydrates excessively and not reducing calories excessively. So you can get all the, cognitive enhancing and performance enhancing benefits of ketones now without fasting. And there are other benefits of fasting and carbohydrate restriction you could make a case for in certain populations, like I was talking about earlier. But it is kind of cool. Like, you don't even have to like be on a ketosis based diet now to elevate your ketone levels pretty considerably. So, I actually just released a podcast today on my channel with these guys who make drinkable ketones, and they're incredible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I really do love the idea of, for example, like you said, just take exogenous ketones if it's the right choice for you, and avoid the actual other stresses of chronic actual ketosis. I think it's brilliant, and it's wonderful that we have hacks like that. I'm going to move on to another question, and I'm going to really switch gears here, Ben. And this is one that I really like to ask pretty much every expert that we bring on who actually knows what they're talking about. And I just really like to hear people's opinions on this. In my opinion, honestly, I'm still undecided. But what do you think, Ben, is the number one driving force behind our current American obesity epidemic? I mean, you hear, it's ultra processed foods, it's carbs, it's, environmental
seed oils.
Yeah, seed oils, it's environmental chemicals, it's
essential oils,
our sedentary lifestyle. I mean, and obviously you could say it's a combination of things, but what is your opinion? Because our health is just terrible, right? Our chronic disease, our metabolic, the state of our, metabolic health is awful. What do you think is the biggest driver behind that?
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with the idea that inflammation can suppress the ability to be able to burn fat to be used as energy. Inflammation from, let's say, like high levels of linoleic acid from damaged seed oils. There's also plenty of evidence to show that your body will build new fat cells to store toxins, whatever, like F, D, and C yellow number 8,000, or whatever the evil Kellogg's is doing to make us fat. And that's certainly true as well. You could also say that, well, human beings don't burn as many calories back to, cold and heat because we just live in temperature controlled environments. And there's even a book about that called The Comfort Crisis. But as unsexy as my reply is, basically it comes down to SICO, calories in, calories out, right? Basically unfettered access to hyper palatable foods that are easily accessible, combined with a lack of need to move much for our jobs or daily levels of physical activity, right? If you were to just move more and eat less, you could even live in a pretty toxic environment, be inflamed, not ever get cold or hot, etc., and you'd still lose weight. I mean, I could give you, if you're burning 2,500 calories a day, I give you 2,000 calories of Coca-Cola for your diet. And you're gonna lose weight, right? So yeah, I mean, it's going to cause nutrient deficiencies and long-term metabolic damage and some inflammation that's not going to serve you later on. But the biggest reason is eating too much and not moving enough. Now, I think the bigger issue is, and I'm sure you run into this at the gym a lot, Annie, people are like banging their head against the wall because they're dieting and exercising and the dial's not moving. And that's when you peel back the curtains and you say, okay, well, what do your personal care products look like? What do your household cleaning chemicals look like? How much processed and ultra processed food are you consuming? What's the oil ratio and composition of your diet? Are you throwing temperature dysregulation at your body? Have you tested for micronutrient deficiencies beyond just carbs, fats, and proteins that are also associated with overweight and obesity? Have you looked into thyroid function? Have you even embraced the idea that every cell in your body is basically a battery and operates at a specific electrochemical gradient across that cell? And so if you're not charging up the body with photons of light, such as sunlight, or negative ions absorbed by being outside on the surface of the planet in a natural setting, and you're simultaneously just like bombarding yourself with EMF while being in a dark LED lit space during the day, like all those things I'm listing off, that's like the icing on the cake that moves the dial once you figured out how to eat less and move more. But ultimately, the root of the issue, the foundation of the issue is people are not eating less and not moving more.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I appreciate it. I like to hear everybody's opinion on this. It's just really interesting for me. And obviously this is just an N of one comment. I'm just one person working with mostly women, I would say. So a lot of my personal experience with exercise and then talking lifestyle nutrition is a lot of women. And it's actually just been really interesting to me. And we've talked on this show recently quite a bit about this, that at least for me and the kinds of women that I work with almost every day, and we're talking a lot of middle-aged, moving into perimenopause, or maybe not quite there, but they're getting there, women who are legit overweight. But I will tell you that more of them are actually under eating and weight loss resistant than are actually overeating. And that's been really interesting to me. And that's not to say I don't believe in, what do they call it? Keto, calories in, calories out. It's not like I don't believe in it, but it's just been really interesting just personally for me to walk with these women through their journey and find that, like you said, a lot of them have been dieting their whole life. And I think that's a big part of it. That 90s diet culture hit really hard, I think. And you usually find super dysregulated adrenals, and you almost always find low functioning thyroid. And it's just been interesting, at least for the types of people that I work with. Although I do run into those people who truly are just overeating. And those are the easy ones, honestly, because they usually have
stop eating.
Yeah, they have a healthy
much.
thyroid,
Yeah.
and they seem to actually have a functional metabolism. They just need to eat a little less and maybe look at the quality of their food. But man, I've been shocked how many women are overweight, weight loss resistant, and eating 800 to 1,000 calories a day.
What you have just defined is the sample size found in the average American gym.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right.
Yes.
We talk about the country as a whole related to Gabe's question. I'm talking about the average Walmart that you walk into.
Right.
And when you move on to the gym, these are people, many of whom who have made incorrect exercise choices and crash dieted. And now we're talking about an entirely different population. Honestly, a pretty small subset of the American population who is overweight, obese, and dealing with chronic disease. But you are 100% correct, Annie. The percentage of women at the gym right now who need to shift to something like a nutrient-dense, let's say Weston A. Price type of protocol with lots of raw fermented dairy and other fermented foods and fresh baked sourdough bread and good healthy grass-fed or pastured meat and egg yolks and bone broth and a lot of good minerals and antioxidants and a diet that's diverse in greens. That population eating that and then lifting weights and doing less chronic cardio, you're going to see better results in. I'm sure you've seen this over and over.
100%. Yep.
The average American woman who hasn't even made that step to get into the gym, in most cases for that population, we're talking about, just get off your butt and quit stuffing your face so much. So it kind of depends on the population we're talking about.
100%. And actually, that's a really helpful point, because I guess if we statistically, you're right. The people who are actually in the gym and have been dieting their whole life and care, right? I mean, they care and they've been doing something. That is a smaller subset of our population, but it's kind of a, those are the kinds of people that are going to call you for nutritional advice, right?
Yeah.
Like the average Walmart, as he said, they don't care. So it's actually, it's a nuanced conversation, right? It's a whole different solution for one group of people versus another group of people. I cannot reiterate enough that someone who comes in who is that Walmart person, I just praise the Lord, because they are so much easier. If you can just get them to do it.
Yeah.
Like
right.
just
Exactly. So if I have and again, like, you guys are going to lose your Walmart sponsor totally.
No.
Fucking Walmart. But if I have the Walmart person come to me for advice, I'm saying take 10,000 steps a day, quit drinking Coca-Cola, and maybe even skip breakfast. And if I have the gym weight resistant person coming my way, I'm going more for build muscle, eat a nutrient dense diet, and get nature time versus just being in a dark box all of your life. And so it's a real difference in terms of the way that you approach both populations.
Super helpful.
Yeah, no, that was great. I can't agree with that enough.
I got a couple comments here. We actually have Pastor Wilson coming on next week to talk about his book on food. So I when I look at these things, I look at kind of through more of a biblical spiritual lens, and then just kind of through stuff that Annie's learned in her research and conclusions she's come to. So I kind of I'm not I'm a jack of all trades, not an expert at any of this. But as I look at our country and its food and its obviously unhealthy situation that we're in, diabetes way up in the last century, cancer, all these
everything,
weight gain way up and everything. I look at it as two levels. I think your explanation that you gave me is kind of in line with my practical explanation. I have my practical explanation is why we're here is because we're the first generation to have refrigerators and access to food in our house 24/7. We're the first generation to not actually have to work physically outside, or a lot of us at least. So we have like a lot of these are blessings, but we haven't figured out also how to handle those blessings well, which is why I think we're unhealthy. And then I would say the spiritual side of this, and you can't really disconnect these two, is that when there's unconfessed sin in our land, God does curse food. Like God cursed lands, he cursed food, he cursed the animals. I mean, there's examples of this throughout the Old Testament that if you aren't faithful, then God's going to turn that blessing into a cursing for you. So I think there's very much a spiritual element to everything that we're facing. So maybe some comments on that, and then I want to follow up with a question that I'm also going to ask Doug.
Yeah, certainly. And I think the ultimate key to the spiritual piece has really been proven out in the past year or so, and it's Ozempic. Yeah, when you look at sin and a culture that strays from God's law and the 10 Commandments, and even the idea of wise and responsible stewardship of the land, you see some of the issues that we have right now, right? Like greed and lack of care for the environment, leading to things like monocropping, corn and grain subsidies, improper treatment of animals just to get as much meat and milk and fatten them up as quickly as possible, no rest for the soil, no actual attention paid to being good gardeners of the planet, and obviously, Gordon Wilson has talked about this. Yeah. Joel Salatin's done a great job addressing this. The idea of responsible stewardship of the land in such a manner that it kind of like handcuffs us a little bit when it comes to being able to produce more crappy food. Not that you can't produce whatever Oreos and Twinkies when you're giving the soil a rest every 7 years, or making sure that cows are sacrificed ethically and responsibly, but it does make it a little bit harder to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's one thing that comes to mind when you bring up the spiritual piece. I also think that in general, you could say that not like you would never probably accuse Annie, one of your clients at the gym, back to what we were talking about earlier, of being, say, gluttonous or lazy. But wealth, and especially wealth accompanied by straying from God and his commandments, I think can result in gluttonousness and laziness,
Certainly.
Which can then lead to sickness, chronic disease, a lot of the issues that we see with people who are obese and overweight. It's kind of down to the, hard times make good men, good times make
hard men.
Make man, however that thing goes.
You got it.
I think I generally got it. But I think that you cannot deny there's a spiritual element. I would say the biggest piece of the spiritual element for me comes down to selfishness and lack of attendance paid to our call to be good gardeners and stewards of the planet.
Okay, one follow-up question you can go back to.
Yeah, you're good.
So in the Bible, it talks about basically like if you're giving thanks for your food, then eat it. He's like, even the idolatrous food that you find in the meat market, if someone has a conscious problem, don't eat it in front of them or whatever. But like, it says specifically, as Paul references, he says, all things are from the Lord. The earth is the Lord and all its fullness, as he's talking about food. And I believe this is in Corinthians. And so he's saying like the earth is good, all its full, it's all the Lord's. And so eat it, eat whatever is given to you and give thanks. And I'm just making that kind of like as a general statement because it's not that we could have, seed oils or whatever. We can have certain foods where it's like, hey, let's, or maybe someone has certain allergies, don't eat that food, stuff like that. That's just not going to be good for your body. so but I have this problem with kind of this food culture that constantly says no, 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 when the Bible basically says go, go, go. Now, that's not talking about, I'm not referencing being a good steward or not. I'm not making a judgment call on that yet. But I want to apply these comments to our culture. We let the world kind of define what is fat. Now, this is, which I think is a separate debate between gluttony. Gluttony is an obvious sin, but I don't see, a scale. I don't see a definition in the scripture of what is fat and why is that, healthy or unhealthy. But I also don't want the world to define it. But I also see that our America is more unhealthy than it ever has been. But I guess what I'm trying to find out is, or trying to search through, and this is going to be my question to Pastor Wilson next week, is what is a biblical definition of, and maybe this comes down to just being a bad steward, but a good biblical definition of what is fat. Is that what it means to be fat?
Are you talking just
as a person,
or
as a
are
person?
You talking about health?
Well, health to me, it's like, okay, now you're creeping into bad steward or good steward. If you're healthy, I think that's distinctly different than someone who maybe has more weight on their body than I would have weight on my body.
Yeah, it's certainly possible to be somewhat overweight, or actually the values range from about 22 to 33% for women and 11 to 23% for men as a healthy body weight, which by magazine cover level definitions would be considered fat, right? Once you cross those thresholds, you do tend to see more levels of chronic disease that would suggest someone might not be being a good steward of their body. Yeah. But in a way, sometimes fat can be a little bit like, it's like fat related to gluttonous and extreme laziness can be a little bit, not to be too crude here, a little bit like porn. It's kind of like, it when you see it, like someone who looks like they're just like well fed and maybe eating a little bit of nutrient dense foods, and they still take care of their body and move, and they're obviously highly functional. And maybe the gym isn't the highest thing on their checklist, but they don't have to ride in a scooter around Walmart, right? So I think some of it is a little bit subjective and murky, but I think we can kind of draw a rough line in the sand in terms of where being fat crosses over the line as something that's being caused by gluttonousness and laziness. And I think you also raised a very important point. It's like, well, if God created all things good, why would we not just consume anything willy-nilly? Right, like seed oils, Kellogg's, deep fried Twinkies. Why not throw cannabis and psilocybin and LSD and everything else into the mix? Just like eat everything. But you have to consider two factors: the upstream sourcing of what you're actually consuming, right? Like, did it involve extreme pollution, monocropping, poor soil practices, things that directly deny our calling to take care of the planet, not in a way that is idolatrous, but in a very post-millennial sense of being able to pass on good land and good soil to our offspring. And then downstream implications of how is this actually going to affect my ability to be a good father, husband, mother, wife, leader, and man or woman of God tomorrow? Am I going to wake up drunk and inflamed and yet again with joint pain that leaves me barely able to chase my 3-year-old across the living room? But heck, God made all things good, so I had the 4th helping of deep fried casserole because it was there, right? So I think you have to consider both the upstream and downstream implications. But I think that some people do take it too far. Like some people would go out to pizza with their family of 7 and put their "I'm allergic to seed oils" card on the table, and then leave the family that they invited there to join them alone at the table because there's no gluten-free pizza and all that has seed oils on it, right? Like I think similar to the fat piece, you have to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, so I agree with you, I think, on a lot of what you said, but the thing that I want to do is I want to name the sin as best I can. So I can name gluttony. I know what the definition of gluttony actually it's not an overweight definition, it's a lust definition. It's a God, it's an idol definition. So I understand the definition of gluttony. And I understand, I think for the most part, I think we could talk about the definition of being a good steward. Hey, you're doing that, it's giving you diabetes, and that diabetes is going to kill you. You aren't being a good steward. Like you have diabetes, don't eat sugar, right? And that would be kind of clearly getting into the definition of being a good steward with the body. where I'm concerned about, and this goes back to my spiritual concerns here, is there's this whole online movement about and they use AI avatars about how strong they look, and they make fun of, literally, I saw even some of my friends do this, say, I don't listen to this pastor because he weighs more than he should, literally. And so that's where I'm like I think that is wrong. That's what I'm getting at, the spiritual whiplash that we're having, where I think people are wanting to get back in shape and wanting to get healthy physically and food wise, but then you have this whole backlash of this younger crowd that wants to be bulky and muscular, but then also will tell this pastor, hey, you're kind of fat and I'm not going to listen to you until you lose weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I think that a big part of this is the definition of the whole gluttonousness and laziness piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's not super well defined, at least in, let's say, like Christian circles who are judging whether or not their pastor is, let's say, too overweight and needs a talking to about their diet. But for me, as loosey-goosey as this is, and it's not an exact definition, but someone who is not functional, at the brink of a severe chronic disease based on blood work and biomarkers, unable to effectively care for their family and unable to do their job effectively, that's where I think we draw the line. I don't think that being overweight, or even in many cases obese, is an issue. I think it's how it affects your ability to be able to serve God or your family where it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I think that those are helpful comments, because I agree with you also that I think maybe that's where the line is, an easy place to draw a line, or objective place to draw a line. Hey man, if it's affecting your ability to help your family, serve your family, make money for your family, get on your knees and confess your sins to God, you might want to change your how much you weigh. And then I think there's the other side of this where it's like, oh man, you weigh 20 more pounds than I think you should weigh. I'm not going to listen to you as a pastor.
And it's different for different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I can tell you right away, I would be in sin if I were to come over to your guys' house for dinner and have 3 glasses of wine. I'm a total lightweight. I barely ever drink, and when I do, I barely ever drink. Like, I barely ever drink more than 1 serving of alcohol at a time.
Yeah.
I have other friends who could sit for an entire dinner party, go through an entire bottle, and be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So some of it is also pretty subjective as far as how you're biologically responding to certain food or drink choices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
thanks, Ben. Those
are really good thoughts. And I actually want, my next question totally applies to this. And I'm going to say it, and then I have a thought. And the question was, where do you think Christians in particular have gone wrong or are getting wrong with regards to health and fitness? And one thing I just wanted to add to what you guys were just talking about is that I think I agree with what Ben said, which is just like, if you can't function, if you feel terrible, if your level of poor health and laziness
that's an obvious stewardship issue.
And it's just like, it's affecting your ability to be a good mom, a good dad, a good whatever. Then you've crossed a line. But I think one of the problems is that, number one, and we talk about this all this time on the show, is that people in our own specifically Christian communities, we are like post-millennial, and we're very proud of it. And we think long-term about all these other things, building schools, and building
planning churches, starting businesses, blah, 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 blah. All this stuff.
But we are not post-millennial in terms of the way that we think about what the kinds of foods that we regularly put in our body, or the kinds of physical activity we engage in or don't engage in, what the impact that's going to have in the long term.
And by the time you're 60, 70 years old,
you binge on a whole thing.
The generational impact, right? Like if it's fried chicken takeout Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at your house, or if you decide you're going to do 7 glances at your smartphone during dinner for that one last important email, your children's children are probably also going to have KFC night Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and dad's going to be dinking around on his phone at least 7 times during dinner because that's what you built, right? So yeah, there's definite generational impact in terms of everything from your food choices, your technology choices, your lifestyle choices. I mean, that's I know that's an obvious statement, but it's important to point out.
But Annie's also getting at to the fact, hey, if you're eating like this when you're 25 years old, 30 years old, 35 years old, that is, if you keep that up, you're actually going, your body at 70-year-old is going to be way different than if you change maybe some of your habits when you're 32 years old.
Like you might not be, drastically sicker the next day. You might wake up feeling like hot trash, but what is that going to come, as those habits compound over time? I mean, you could die much earlier from heart disease. You could be, an insulin dependent diabetic. I mean, like there's big consequences down the line, but we don't think long-term in terms of our health.
And to reply to your question, this might be the last one I have time to dive into about Christians, especially in like the fitness industry. And the problem that I see, it relates exactly to what you just talked about, Annie. It is the just in case this is going to shorten my life from a post-millennial standpoint or cause me to be a poor steward or make me less likely to be able to function properly, I should make sure that I'm doing my hyperbaric and an ice bath and a trip to the gym and shorting sleep to get up at 4 a.m. to do my PEMF therapy and make sure that I hit the gym after work so that I'm a half hour late for dinner or whatever. Like I see a lot of people, partially because of the information overload, and especially in the sector I'm operating in, like the biohacking sector, a real big focus on anti-aging and longevity that flirts with transhumanism.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
Biggest influencers right now, probably two of the biggest influencers right now, I'll name even three: Brian Johnson, Dave Asprey, and Peter Diamandis, right? And there are many others. Like they're just feeding people through the fire hose on the idea of don't die. Yeah. Right. Like 100%. We can, I forget what they call it, something velocity. But basically the point at which there's a human being alive who's not going to die. I mean, Brian Johnson just tweeted the other day, it would be incredible, the first person who figures out how to actually allow human beings to live forever. And of course, me and 20 other people commented, well, Jesus already figured that out. But the mistake I see in my world is people get obsessive while justifying it as a laudable effort because it's equipping them to, back to what I was explaining before, be able to function better, do their job better, be a better father, husband, mother, wife, whatever, but they're taking it way too far. And so, that's where I actually have a difficult time in my job, is because like I'm a biohacker, I teach people how to live longer and how to function better and have better blood work, but it can very easily go down the slippery slope of obsessing selfishly over every last metric and strategy you can use. And you can justify it by saying, well, I'm living post-millennially, I got to be around, I'm 90 to preach the word.
Oh my gosh.
That's so much. He's got to go. Ben's got to go.
I'm dying.
Ben, I know we already went over your time 5 minutes, so you can hang up now. And me and Annie, you got any closing comments, baby? Has Ben? Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've got more questions. We can bring you on again, maybe, if you're willing.
Yeah, I do a twofer, and hopefully it'll be easier because, we'll see. But hopefully in 20 days I'll be down there anyway. So.
In the studio.
Awesome.
All right, Ben. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. Later.
Yep.
Oh, okay. This is what I was gonna say. So you guys, I literally, Ben and I clearly talk to so different groups of people, because he's working with these big rich CEOs and he's huge in the biohacking space, and I know that. So literally the thing that he said when I said, what do Christians get wrong? He said the opposite thing then would be true of the kinds of normal people that I work with.
That you work with,
but, and I literally, another question that I wanted to ask him was, in the biohacking space, where do you draw the line between being post-millennial and being a good steward, between just being scared to die? So I literally wrote that down, but we just didn't get to it. But I think the point is that normal people, like the kinds of people in our circles and the kinds of people that I talk to every day, I don't think they're being post-millennial enough in terms of their health. I think they're eating garbage and they're just
not thinking long term.
They're only thinking about feasting, and they are not thinking about the fact that they may now die when they're 60 instead of 80, or be a very dysfunctional grandparent, or never go on a hike with their kids because they are treating their body like garbage. He deals with a whole other end of the spectrum,
where he's dealing with CEOs who want to live forever,
or people who are actually being vain and obsessed with not dying, even though that's not what humans are supposed to do. You know what I mean? In the name of being post-millennial, and those people are out there also. So that's just so funny.
Well, no, they probably don't even say they're post-mill.
No, he said it. He
Yeah.
said Christians are doing that.
Okay,
That was
that's
his
true.
answer. He was
Okay.
specifically
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about Christians. And I know there's
Yeah.
a lot of people who aren't Christians who are
Yeah.
doing that too.
Because I watched this interview with Tucker Carlson did this interview with one of those guys, one of those
Yeah.
CEOs.
Oh yeah. I listened to it.
And did you listen to that interview? And it's just crazy. It's actually kind of
scary stuff.
creepy.
It's
yeah.
scary stuff. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
I'm never gonna die.
And it's actually very self-centered idolatry on yourself.
Well, and I think there's got to be some serious fear, like fear of death,
Yeah,
fear of aging involved there. But I would love to bring him on again and talk about that more because he's so big in the biohacking space. But I just thought that was funny because I really do think you can mess it up on both ends.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That was good. That was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Any other comments?
I want one of those treadmills, those silent treadmills. Do you know what? Whenever I listen to him, I don't listen to all his shows, but I listen to interviews that I think are going to be interesting. I can always tell when he's walking.
He's on a treadmill.
Because you can just hear that. Like you can hear him breathing just a little bit. And I'm like, Ben's on a walk.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Very good. Well, thank you guys. Tune in for Water Break. Next week, we're actually going to be talking with Pastor Wilson about some of the questions that we actually asked Ben tonight.
This is great timing.
Today. Yeah, so good. Doug wrote a book called Confessions of a Foodaholic.
Food Pharisee.
No, not Food Pharisee.
Pretty sure
Food Catholic.
Oh, Catholic.
Yeah.
In the, he referenced Food Pharisee.
Yes.
He has that name. Yeah. Food Catholic.
Yeah. Food Pharisee is a great
about this last
name
time.
and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to be in a conversation with us, email us at wrenchmedia@gmail.com, wrenchmedia@gmail.com. Follow Andy on Instagram, me on Twitter. Thank you guys so much. Have a good afternoon.
Bye, guys.
A master called together a few young men of this generation and spoke to them, saying, I gave your great-grandfathers a time of despair and poverty and global war. They were strong and victorious and built an empire greater than any other. But they were terrible fathers and raised entitled sons and daughters of rot who inherited everything through no courage of their own. To those rotten sons, your own grandfathers, I gave abundance and wealth and stability. But they pissed it all away on debauchery and sexual revolution, establishing many idols and slaughtering tens of millions of children in sacrifice to their appetites. One generation fought against the perpetrators of a great Holocaust. The next dishonored that victory with an even greater Holocaust of their own children. The children who did survive, your fathers, carried on the sexual descent of their parents into new madness and new disease, piercing and inking their skin like death-worshipping pagans as they did, establishing special days of pride to celebrate the debauch, slaughtering more children and castrating and poisoning others, claiming to be creators when they were destroyers, mutilating the young and calling it acceptance. All these generations I have judged, and am judging. Their madness now is only a taste of my wrath. The young men were afraid and asked the master why he had called them and why he was telling them these things. Because it is now your turn. I am giving all of this chaos to you, he said. Your inheritance is a world of crumbling false gods crowded with blind and mad worshippers. I am entrusting you with a world of empires built on cracked and heaving foundations. The time of your inheritance is near. You have only a little while to prepare yourselves. Seize this moment of chaos and build me a world of sanity and righteousness. When I return, I will judge what you have built for me. With so much rubble to work with, I expect great things. The master turned to leave, but the young men begged him to wait. How can we do this, they asked. There are hundreds of millions of unbelievers in our nation alone and only a few of us. Their master answered, saying, I am not a hard master. You will have the truth and wisdom if you desire it. And you may each choose one woman to help you. That should be enough. Go now and build New St. Andrews College. Carpe Chaos.